Hello and welcome to the Crystal Palace podcast. I'm Alfonso Greenbrook, and in today's podcast I'll be looking over the game against Leicester City by bringing you my match review, player rankings and my man of the match. As well as this, I'm also going to bring you interviews with Hodgson, Wilfried Zaha, James Tompkins and James McArthur after the game. So let's begin. A remarkable second half of football saw Crystal Palace steal 3 points from a relentless offensive Leicester City side thanks to goals from Michy Batshuayi, Wilfried Zaha and Luka Milivojevic. The Eagles were the inferior team for large swathes of the game, however their dogged defending and clinical eye for goal meant that they finished the evening as victors. Early in the match, Leicester began on the front foot after Jeffrey Slutt was adjudged to have committed a foul from 25 yards out. Recording the game's first shot on target on his home debut, Youri Tielemans showcased an impressive shooting ability by hitting a target with a racker from distance. Gaeta was alert as the clash opened, however, and held the ball with ease. For the second time in 5 minutes, travelling Palace fans were told to hold their breaths as Jamie Vardy glanced a header inches over Gaeta's bar from a well-whipped cross. James Maddison then looked to capitalise on the Foxes' momentum with a shot from the edge of the box, but Milivojevic bravely deflected the venomous effort with a twisting lunge. For the home side's third chance in as many minutes, Tielemans then angled a shot at goal, but, as with the Belgians' first attempt, Gaeta stood behind it and held the ball. Harvey Barnes was next to try his luck, but his well-struck shot to Gaeta's left was met by the gloved fist of the diving Spaniard. Palace teased the watching faithful as they encroached into Leicester's area on occasions, but their play was ultimately an empty threat. And it was Leicester who landed the next 2, 3 and 4 punches, all fairly soft but all on target nevertheless. Well against the run of play, however, Palace took the lead through a sharp-looking Batshuayi. As James McArthur looked up before firing an effort goal-bound, his strike cannoned off the recent Belgium signing past the wrong-footed Kasper Schmeichel. The home side then came agonisingly close to levelling just minutes later when Tielemans, who had been troubling the Palace back line all game, took yet another strike at goal, this one whistling just wide of the Palace upright. The second half opened in much the same vein as the first, with Leicester not taking the most out of their sequence of chances. Maddison looked to open his side's account in dramatic fashion as he launched a shot at goal from a remarkable distance, however his effort flew wide. Enjoying some smart link-up play in Leicester's half, by this point Palace were far more involved in the game than before, but their newly discovered foothold was shattered when Jonny Evans turned home the ball from 8 yards out shortly after the hour mark. Ignited by the equaliser, the clash had launched into life and, before Leicester could take stock and enjoy the leveller, Palace regained the lead as Zaha turned home an astute cross from McArthur to restore the Eagles' advantage. Determined to steal the game and take all 3 points back to S3E35, Batshuayi looked to double his tally when he rifled an effort at goal which Schmeichel emphatically saved. Defending the rebound, however, the Foxes' goalscorer Evans fouled slap inside the box and gave away a late opportunity for Palace to grab a third. Stepping up as coolly as ever, Captain Milivojevic buried the resulting penalty to win the game for the Eagles as he hit the ball into a bulging net. Adding insult to injury and a fourth to Palace's total, Zaha netted his second of the afternoon, having been thread through by Jordan. Looking up, he slammed the ball home and wheeled away in elated celebration to record Palace's joint biggest win of the season. So I'm now going to move on to my player ratings, but before I start, don't forget you can follow us on both Twitter and Facebook at Crystal Palace for all the latest Palace news. So if you are someone like me who does like to follow a vast array of Palace accounts on both Twitter and Facebook, then of course do head over to the respective sites and follow our accounts at Crystal Palace. Now obviously alongside just general Palace news about the club, we obviously do regularly update it with transfer news, so even though, the transfer window shut obviously last month, we've still got a few transfer rumours coming about which possibly could happen in summer. So if you are someone who wants to keep up to date on all the transfers, whether that be during the transfer window or rumours that, come up during the season, then of course do so there. Obviously alongside that we obviously post interviews as well, so whether that be with players, management, people within the club or whatever it is, we obviously do post interviews on there. And obviously alongside that we also post just general club news as well, whether that be about the academy, the stadium, the ladies team. So if you do want a place to get all the latest Palace news, and I would highly recommend you do it for transfer news, because we're almost pretty good at actually sourcing all these stories and putting them up there as quick as possible. So if you are someone who wants a place to get all the latest Palace news, especially the transfer news during the transfer windows when they're open, and of course feel free to do so. And alongside that, much like every account on Twitter, we obviously post our own opinions. Now there is another guy who runs the account over on Twitter, so if you do want to get his views of the game, you know, before the game, what he thinks of the lineup, after the game, sort of his quick reactions. So if you do want to get them sort of views, like literally instant reaction before the podcast comes out a few days later, if you want to get instant reaction of the game, do head over to our Twitter account as well, because of course we have guys on there who post their own opinion. Now another great place for you to share your opinion is in the YouTube comments. So if you are listening to the podcast on YouTube, then do feel free to drop a comment below the video with your player ratings, where you rate the players' performances from 1 to 10, and of course with 10 being the best. Now the reason I want you to do this is essentially I've got my opinion of the game, and I've gone through and I've rated all of the players individually, but rather than just having my opinion, I want you guys to share your own opinion, so I can read through the comment section and essentially see how you rated the players and compare it to how I rated them. And that, I suppose, for every fan, just give you a more broader view of the game. So rather than me just having my one set view of the game, I can actually read your guys' comments and essentially just build up a different opinion of the game, if indeed it is different, because I'm sure you might agree with quite a lot of things. And even if you don't want to do your player ratings, you know, where you rate the players' performances, go ahead and just comment below with your general views of the game. So whether you're a Palace fan or whether you're a Leicester City fan, you know, comment below with your views about the game. Obviously, a Palace perspective, it's great to see us scoring 4 goals away from home. Obviously, our record against Leicester, or our good record against Leicester, has continued. And of course, a Leicester perspective, we've obviously, because of that result, that's their 6th loss in a row, and it's meant that their managers got sacked. So in terms of a Leicester perspective, not so great in the fact that not a good performance, manager got sacked, and obviously they've got all of that troubles to deal with now. And then obviously a Palace perspective, a really good performance in terms of the second half. First half wasn't that great, but we still got ahead, and of course we went on and just finished the game off at the end. So obviously there's going to be different opinions there, so alongside your player ratings, where you rate the players' performances, feel free to just to share your general views about the game, you know, from whichever view you want to look at. And if there is anything you think I've missed, obviously feel free to comment that as well. And if you do have any questions you want to ask me, I'm always, you know, almost instantly up there, you know, replying to your questions. So if you do have any questions or things you might disagree with me, then of course do feel free to comment them below. And just, I suppose, the final thing for me really is that it's not just me coming back and reading your comments, but any other Palace fans or Leicester fans who come to the video, rather than them just listening to me in the podcast, they can read the comment section as well, and that just gives them a more broader view of the game. And I'm sure Leicester fans don't really want to dwell on it, but in terms of a Palace perspective, a very good away performance, and once again backing up that point that we're so much better away from home than we are at home. So of course there can be a lot of debate there. Now if you do want to follow any of the social media pages that I've mentioned or join our Facebook group, then do check all the links that will be in the description below. But I'm now going to move on to my player ratings, starting in goal with Wilfried Zaha, who I'm going to give a 7 overall. Now in terms of Zaha's performance, I suppose going back to the Doncaster game, there was quite a lot of debate, and I certainly touched on it in the fact that who should have started that game. You know, should Hennessy start the next game in the FA Cup, or whether Zaha should come in because it's a quarter-final, so of course there's something to play for now because the end is in sight. And of course there was quite a lot of debate as to who would start and you know, start in the next game against Watford. Now in terms of the game here, obviously Zaha's first choice now, so there was no debate here, but actually him coming back into the side, you know, he's had 2 weeks off or so, came in and put in a blinding performance, hence why I've given him the 7. Now in terms of comparing him to Kasper Schmeichel, who of course is Leicester's goalkeeper, in terms of comparing what they had to do in the game, in that first half, for sure Zaha was the busier of the 2 goalkeepers. You know, we weren't really testing Kasper Schmeichel at the other end, but Zaha, every time Leicester got on the ball, they would try and do, even though we were defending well, they were trying to hit shots from distance, and actually Zaha was very busy and actually done a very good job. You know, I think there was efforts, well, one in particular from Youri Tielemans, which was a really good one, and one from Harvey Barnes as well. So these obviously required what you would call routine saves, you know, saves that you would expect him to make. But that's what you want Zaha to do. You know, you want him to have the quick reactions to actually come out on goal, punch the ball away or catch the ball, or obviously save the efforts like he done for Tielemans and Harvey Barnes. So them 2 in particular were good routine saves. But alongside that, there were other saves and other claims, like I've already said, that he done throughout the game. So in terms of the first half especially, he was very impressive. And in terms of us going in 1-0, we didn't obviously deserve that lead because Leicester were by far the better team in that first half. But if you're looking at it, going, actually Zaha kept us in the game with the amount of saves they made in the game. Now there was one chance in particular which of course could have resulted in a goal, and that was when the balls got put into the box and Jamie Vardy's had a header. Obviously it went over, but you know, that's sort of an occasion where if, you know, Zaha wasn't quite in the right place or didn't really look like he was going to get there, and maybe Gaeta should have done better, but luckily for us, Jamie Vardy headed over. So I suppose, he made good saves from Tielemans and Barnes, but then maybe he could have done a little bit better with the Jamie Vardy one, because on another day, Vardy might have scored that. And I suppose, obviously fans watching it, we were holding our breaths, because as soon as that ball came in, we thought Jamie Vardy, he obviously hasn't scored against us recently, but previously he scored good goals against us. So of course we were a bit worried, but of course we had a massive sigh of relief, let's say, when the ball actually dropped wide of the post. Because when you think about it, when you're looking at Leicester's threats, you're looking at Maddison and Vardy, probably the main threats. So when you've got someone like Vardy in the box, it's a bit worrying, but luckily for us, nothing did come about that. Now moving on to the second half, obviously in terms of the busier of the two goalkeepers, it's sort of the roles sort of turned around in that second half, in the fact that Gaeta was busy in the first half, Kasper Schmeichel wasn't, and then obviously in the second half Gaeta wasn't as busy as he was in the first, but I suppose Kasper Schmeichel, the fact that he conceded 3 goals in that half, was of course the busier of the two goalkeepers. Now in terms of Jonny Evans' goal, I don't really think we could have done too much about that. That's mainly due to the defence. I think it was Milivojevic not closing down the Leicester player who obviously put the cross in, and of course James Tompkins making his only mistake of the game, where of course he wasn't able to get close enough, or wasn't able to block the shot from Jonny Evans. So in terms of the goal, can't really blame Gaeta for that, and that's why I've given him a 7, because his performance across the whole game was very good, and in terms of the only goal we conceded, can't really fault him for that. Now I suppose my final closing statement about him, and I suppose this is the reason why there was a lot of debate as to who should start in the FA Cup, because of who is more commanding. And that was the thing I really liked about the performance here, because like I've said, in that first half we could have easily gone in maybe 2, maybe even 3-0 behind because of the chances Leicester had. But the fact that Gaeta was making these saves, the ones from Tielemans and Barnes, but also was just being commanding and commanding his area, is what made me impressed with him in this game, but also is why people want him to start against Watford in the FA Cup in the quarter-finals. Just because of how commanding he is, it just gives the back four and the rest of the team confidence. So, of course, I could talk here, sit here and talk all day about the Watford game and who should start in goal. But based on this performance, and just based on the sheer influence that Gaeta had, not only in terms of his saves, but in terms of that commanding influence, that is something which, of course, is one of the reasons why he should be starting against Watford in the FA Cup. But overall, another good game from him, and, I think someone got up his a few statistics about him yesterday evening, and one of them was his win percentage with him in the side, and I think it's something near 50%. So that just goes to show how good he is for Palace. The fact that in 50% of the games he's played, we've won. That just goes to show how good he was, and if he can continue with performances like this, where he's making loads of saves, doing what's required of him, as well as just being commanding and making sure the back four and him himself are communicating and they've got that partnership, then of course that'd be great for us going forward. But once again, another good performance from the Spaniard, and certainly does deserve the 7 I've given him. So now I'm going to move on to the first player in our defence, and that is the right back Joe Ward, who I'm going to give a 6 overall. Now in terms of Joe Ward, I talked quite a lot in depth after the Doncaster game, in the fact that I thought he was fairly good in that game, not necessarily the best, but certainly done a shift and contributed to us getting a clean sheet. So of course, no one was expecting Aaron Wan-Bissaka to be injured, but of course when he did, we were looking at Joe Ward going, on one hand, this was his first start since August, and that game he played in August, he got completely ripped to shreds by, I think it was Watford players. So of course there was a bit of scepticism before the game in the fact that, could Joe Ward do his job, and is he as good as he used to be? And actually I've given him a 6, because I do think, much like the Doncaster game, he wasn't necessarily impressive in the fact that everything he done was fantastic, but he done a shift for the team and certainly contributed to us going forth for winning in the game. And that's something you've got to consider, because looking on Twitter, I suppose not even before the game, just looking when it was announced that Aaron Wan-Bissaka and Martin Kelly were both injured, there was quite a lot of debate going, oh, this is going to be terrible. Joe Ward, the last game he played in the Premier League, he got absolutely run to shreds. And of course, I was one of these people thinking, Joe Ward, yes, he done alright against Doncaster, but they didn't necessarily have fast wingers, whereas Leicester City have, much like Watford. So of course, a bit worried before the game. But the fact that he would come in for his first start in the Premier League since August and actually done relatively well throughout the game was of course the thing that really did impress me. Now in terms of Harvey Barnes, he was the one player in particular that was causing Ward quite a lot of problems down that right hand side throughout the whole game. But when you consider in terms of Leicester's chances, most of them sort of came down the middle with people like Maddison, people like Barnes didn't really get. I suppose I don't really want to comment in saying that what he's done this season, but I think Barnes, based on what I've heard and seen, match of the day and stuff, he's been quite a good player for Leicester this season. So of course, he was going to cause Joe Ward quite a lot of problems, but the fact that Ward sort of overcome that and actually dealt with him relatively well was of course a good thing. And you're looking back at the chances that Leicester had in the game, you're looking at Tielemans, Maddison, Vardy as well. You're looking at them and going, we managed to contain these players, and that obviously meant that other players like Barnes, who could have made the difference for Leicester, they really couldn't, because people like Joe Ward were doing really well. Now, of course, much like quite a lot of players, in that first half, he wasn't necessarily the greatest, and I think quite a lot of the time we could see the difference between him and Aaron Wan-Bissaka, in the fact that Wan-Bissaka is just so good that he's very good at carrying the ball forward, whereas Joe Ward, yes, he can defend all right, but going forward, he hasn't really got that. So quite early on in the game, we could see that. But actually, I think the whole team, you could argue, I don't think anyone would argue against it, but we were quite lacklustre, let's say, in that first half, and Leicester were by far the better team. But the thing I liked about Ward's performance is the fact that coming out in the second half, obviously the whole team improved, and we went on to score the 3 goals. After the break, he improved quite a lot, and there was one block in particular which really just epitomised the influence Ward can have, because yes, Ward may not be fantastic, hence why I've given him a 6, but he when called upon, he can make a decent block or a decent tackle, and that's exactly what he did. Gray, towards the end of the games, obviously got inside the box, had a shot, and the fact that Ward made that fine block to obviously thwart that chance was of course good to see. And that's what you want to see from Ward. I've said this about quite a lot of players this season. If they're going to have an average game, or they're not really going to do that much in a game, you'd rather them, when they're called upon, do something great to obviously keep us in the game. And in that perspective, even though Ward was pretty average throughout the whole game, he has done an alright job, but average when it mattered. Like that example with Gray going through on goal, he obviously was able to make that fine block. And I suppose the final really thing for me is that I've given him a 6 because I do think, like I've said, he was fairly average, done what he had to do defensively, but obviously there was clear differences between him and Wan-Bissaka, and the fact that that offensive play was a little bit missing from our game. But like I've said, game of 2 halves from him, improved in that second half drastically, and certainly a good performance from him. So I do think a 6 overall is a fair result, but of course we've got to hope that Aaron Wan-Bissaka is back soon, because of course we've got games coming up which are really important, and of course could help us to safety. So we've got to hope that he'll be back soon. But like I've said already, Joe Ward coming back into the side, not a bad performance from him, but certainly not the best. So I'm going to move on now to our first of our 2 centre backs, and that is James Tompkins, who I'm going to give a 7 overall. Now, of course, Tompkins, and I suppose Saka as well, you can include in that bracket, these guys have been absolute colossals for us this season, and this game was no different in the fact that, yes, we obviously conceded that little bit of a sloppy goal where, of course, both Saka and Tompkins were involved, in the fact that Saka didn't clear it and Tompkins couldn't get the block in. But aside from that, their performances were absolutely outstanding, hence why I've given them a 7. Now, I've talked already about Jamie Vardy, obviously being Leicester's quite obviously one of their biggest threats. So the fact that James Tompkins dealt with him so well throughout the whole game was a thing that was really impressive for me, because obviously we know Jamie Vardy's got pace and we know that Tompkins doesn't, but the fact that whenever Vardy was looking to get runs in or make runs in behind you, the fact that Tompkins was dealing with that was obviously a thing that was quite impressive for me. And once again, just goes to show how good Tompkins is defensively, the fact that he can deal with someone like Jamie Vardy. But the main thing for me is not necessarily dealing with him in terms of making blocks or tackles, it's just the alertness Tompkins showed. So the fact that Tompkins was really aware, making sure he was tracking Vardy, making sure he knew where he was, and essentially putting him in his back pocket by just closing Vardy completely out of the game, bar maybe a few headers and stuff he had. So it was obviously his defending was good against Jamie Vardy in particular, but the fact that he was alert and was making sure that, because Vardy's got that pace and that 1 second you might miss him, he could go through and score. The fact that Tompkins had it pinpoint spot on in terms of being alert and tracking Jamie Vardy was of course good to see. Now, much like Joe Ward, there was one block in particular which was fantastic from James Tompkins, and something I really want to pick out. And once again, that was from Barnes, who of course was causing quite a lot of problems for Palace. And of course, it was a terrific block from him, from very close range as well, which of course, when you're at so close range, it could go one way or another, it could deflect out and they score the rebound. So the fact that he made that terrific block from close range was of course great to see. But then of course he was already down on the ground from making that block, the ball rebounded out, and of course, like I've said, we conceded that goal because of course Tompkins, because he was on the ground, he tried to get up and obviously couldn't get to Jonny Evans quick enough to of course stop Leicester's equaliser. So whilst the block was great, I talked about Ward's, that was a great block, and the same could be said about Tompkins, but unluckily for us, it rebounded to a player on the edge of the box, he's whipped it in, and even though Tompkins almost got to Jonny Evans, like I've said already, he was just 1 or 2 seconds out, and of course they went through to score the equaliser. But to be honest, even though we conceded the goal, which of course is very disappointing considering our last few performances against Leicester, we've had clean sheets. So of course you could say it's a little bit disappointing, but you know, when you consider the defence, aside from the goal we conceded, you know, you can't take anything away from them because they played so well, because they dealt with people like Maddison, Vardy, Tielemans so well, is of course something really, you know, great to see. And I suppose the word to use is just decent, because that's exactly what you seem to expect from James Tomkins week in, week out. But that's what I like to see. I like to see someone like him putting his body on the line, making tackles for the team, and that's exactly what he did. And you know, people, I suppose, are going to talk about Saka in a minute, and the fact that he got injured towards the end of the game. But the fact that Tomkins this season, touch wood, hasn't had that many injuries this season, and so that just shows, well, I suppose it shows maybe an improvement in his fitness or whatever it is. But the fact that he's been able to play all these run-on games and he's been so consistent is obviously a thing that really, really does impress me. And it's so excellent to have players in our side who are not only good players, because every team wants to have good players, but the fact that we've got players who are very consistent is of course great to see. And the fact that Tomkins can consistently perform to such a high standard, you know, getting 7s and 8s almost every week, is obviously a credit to him for the way he performed, but also a credit to the coaching staff, Roy Hodgson, Ray Lewington, just the fact that the work they're doing defensively, keeping us solid at the back, restricting the opposition's chances, keeping us tight, that all seems to be working, and it seems to be getting the best out of people like Tomkins and Saka, who once again, you know, Tomkins in particular was a rock at the back. So once again, James Tomkins here, a very solid performance from him, you know, quite unlucky with the goal and the fact that the rebound, and he couldn't get to Jonny Evans quick enough. But like I've said already, decent display all around, so I do think a 7 is a fair result. So now I'm going to move on to our second centre-back, and that is Mamadou Sakho, who I'm going to give a 7 overall. Now in terms of Saka's performance, I do think across the time he was on the pitch, because of course he went off injured towards the end of the game, but the time he was on the pitch, the sort of, I think it was maybe 70 minutes or so, he actually put in a fairly decent performance. And much like Tomkins, you know, in terms of dealing with the threat that Leicester had going forward, he done a fantastic job in terms of not only frustrating them, but any chances they did have, and when they did get through, obviously dealing with them. Now in terms of his first half performance, I do think he made quite a number of blocks, and you know, there's too many really to name. And obviously, when you consider Leicester were by far the better team in the first half, you needed your defenders to be on their game to obviously try and stop that threat and try and sort of negate the dominance that Leicester were having. So the fact that Sakho in particular was making all of these blocks to essentially stop Leicester, who were in the ascendancy early on, was of course good to see. And I suppose one of the other things, and this is something we've seen quite a lot of him this season, but obviously quite early on in the game we're under the cosh, so the fact that he played with such sort of calmness and composure, in the fact that he was able to make sure, even though we were under the cosh, not playing that great, still able to stay calm, command the rest of the back four, make sure you're still doing your job, not sort of losing your heads because you're not in the ascendancy. And the fact that he just stayed composed, you know, whenever he had to make blocks, he was able to do them. Whenever he had to drive the ball forward, he was very effective at doing that as well. So the fact that he was calm and composed was of course really great to see, and that sort of helped us to weather the storm of that Leicester pressure. Now of course, in terms of the goal we conceded, you know, to make it 1-1, he himself will be quite a little bit annoyed, less so than Tomkins, because of course Tomkins had literally just got up off the ground for making a first block, and of course Sakho probably will be a little bit annoyed with himself because he obviously failed to get more or to get enough on that attempted clearance before Evans made it 1-1. So in terms of that goal, obviously the ball's ricocheted off Tomkins, obviously making that block on the line, come out to the edge of the area for a Leicester City player. He's whipped it in, and obviously Sakho couldn't quite get there quick enough to put a block in, or at least deflect the ball from that cross, and obviously it found its way to Evans, who of course scored because Tomkins wasn't quite near them. So I suppose for both defenders, aside from that goal we conceded, they had absolutely sterling, absolutely outstanding games. And I suppose obviously we went on to win the game, so it didn't really matter, but I'm sure that, you know, Sakho in himself, he's going to be quite annoyed, quite disappointed, not just because of the injury he got, but the fact that he played so well throughout the game, but just a little lapse of concentration, which was only his only mistake of the game, where he didn't make that clearance. He of course is going to be a little bit disappointing with himself, of course, but you know, like I've said, the rest of the team made up for that. You know, a quick response, you know, they scored in 60 minutes, we went up and scored, I think it was on 71, 2 minutes. So the fact that we had that quick response, you know, to get back into the game, and then what we did, we didn't let our heads drop or let Leicester get the ascendancy, you know, from going behind. We just carried on that momentum and obviously went on to you know, score the other goals to win us the game. So of course Saka in particular is going to be a little bit disappointed with that goal, but like I've said already, it doesn't take away from what was a very good performance from him, hence why I've given him the 7. Now, in terms of making amends for the goal, obviously we conceded the goal, like I've said already, he'll be quite annoyed with that, but he did make amends for that quite quickly. You know, obviously the rest of the team went up the other end and were involved in the goals, and of course that was great to see, the fact that we were able to get 3 second half goals. But actually Saka in particular was one of the key guys in that, because he was the guy who led that charge to actually bring the ball forward, which made it 2-1. So of course I could talk all day about Wilf's volley, which was great, you know, the ball from McArthur, which also was just as great, but actually it was the run that Mamadou Sakho made. You know, I've never seen Sakho literally run almost to the edge of the penalty box of the opposition and then obviously pass the ball to McArthur. So you're looking back at that goal and you're thinking, he's just literally not made a tackle or not made a block to make it 1-1, unluckily for us, but then he makes amends by that by literally running almost the whole length of the pitch, offloading the ball to McArthur, and then McArthur puts in a fantastic ball for Zaha to volley. So, you know, we could talk all day about, you know, if and maybes, if he had done better with that goal, but the fact that he made up for that by actually carrying the ball forward was of course really impressive to see. And it once again just backs to the point that he's got to be one of the best ball playing centre backs, you know, certainly in sort of the outside the top 6, because that ability, I don't see many other defenders running from their own half almost to the edge of the opposition's penalty area to offload a ball. So the fact that we've got a defender who can obviously do the defensive work but also so good at carrying the ball forward, driving the team forward, is of course an asset to the team. But of course, you know, having such a good game, you know, you expect him to see out the whole game, but unluckily his evening was cut short for us, and he of course was replaced by Scott Dan, and that was just due to a knee injury. Of course, we don't know how serious it is, but judging by what Roy Hodgson said after the game, the reason Sakho didn't play against Doncaster, even though I don't think he would have anyway, because of course we were playing our second string side, but let's say hypothetically if Sakho was to play there, he didn't, because he had sort of that knee injury, and of course he sort of had to wave it out over the 2-week period, so he'd be ready to play against Leicester. And whether it was a reoccurrence of that, or whether it's just the fact that maybe it was just a little niggle, don't know what it was, but of course Scott Dan replaced him in that second half, and I do think, you know, if he had gone on to play the rest of the game, we might be looking at a 7 or an 8 for his performance, just because of the influence he had on the field. But like I've said already, you know, the fact that he defended well throughout the whole game, especially in that first half where he was making blocks, being very calm and composed on the ball, as well as, you know, the fact that he drove forward so far to obviously have his hand in the goal, which made it 2-1, was of course good to see. But in terms of the injury, which of course put a down on what was a very good performance from him, it's going to be a little bit disappointing, the fact that he went off injured. But like I've said already, hopefully it isn't too serious, and if it is, well, I hope it isn't too serious, because he had it you know, during the West Ham game and obviously missed the Doncaster game, so of course it's a reoccurrence of an injury as opposed to a new one. So hopefully he can recover in time, you know, for our games coming up. You know, you're looking at your Burnleys, your obviously the Watford FA Cup game and Brighton coming up. So of course he's not going to make, you know, the Man United game for sure. So we've just got to hope, you know, he recovers well enough for the games coming up in March, which of course are really important. But once again, Mamadou Sakho here, very good performance from him, and certainly does deserve the 7 I've given him. So I'm now going to move on to the final player in our defence, and that is the left back Patrick Vanano, who I'm going to give a 6 overall. Now, I've talked quite a lot about him recently, and the fact that he's been fairly average, you know, consistently average was the phrase I use, because his performances haven't necessarily been great, but actually against Doncaster in particular, he seemed to have improved in the fact that he was looking to get forward more and he was still doing a shift defensively. So I suppose that game in particular, the Doncaster game, was a step in the right direction in terms of his performances, and I do think this game here against Leicester was sort of a continuation of his rise back to his best, because this was a performance where once again he looked to be getting back to his best, looked to be getting involved a lot more, hence why I've given him the 6. Now, in terms of the first half, much like the whole team, he was quite subdued in that first half, mainly because the rest of the team were playing quite bad. Well, I wouldn't say bad, we weren't playing up to, let's say, our standards. We weren't playing up to our best, and obviously that seemed to affect the whole team, and, you know, Vanano in particular. But actually, one of the reasons for that, and one of the reasons why he wasn't necessarily the greatest, or he wasn't necessarily involved, is just because most of the action was coming down the opposite flank. So of course Joe Ward had to sort of weather the storm there, and I'm pretty sure that because, you know, Vanano's been fairly good and fairly consistent defensively, you know, Leicester have obviously seen that and decided to exploit the weakness we have down that right hand side, because we're not playing Wan-Bissaka, and essentially because they were doing that, it obviously meant, yeah, it essentially meant that Vanano had a fairly quiet first half, because Watford were only attacking down that right hand side. Now, Of course, that's great for him because he doesn't have too much to do. But of course, like I've said already, in that first half, could have been a better half from the whole team. And I suppose he's one of the players who, of course, you could include in that. Now, obviously, at half-time, Leicester obviously had to make a few changes because it wasn't quite working out for them. And obviously, they brought on Demarai Gray, who we know how good he is, the pace he's got, the quality he's got. And even though you'd expect him to have quite a difficult task up against Van Aanholt, because, of course, both players have got pace, but of course Demarai Gray's got that skill that maybe Van Aanholt doesn't have. So of course you would expect it to be quite a good battle. But the fact that it didn't really have too much effect on Van Aanholt was of course good to see. And essentially it's just because he put in another solid performance at left back and essentially sort of restricted Demarai Gray to limited chances. So when you've got when you've got Leicester who were attacking down that right hand side throughout the first half, obviously they bring on a new player in that second half, start to attack down that left hand side, but nothing really came from it because obviously Van Aanholt was defending so well as well. So obviously you've got to look at it and go, first half quite subdued, but obviously in the second half a good improvement, not necessarily enough to give him a 7, but an improvement nonetheless to of course help him deal with Demarai Gray. Now in terms of his understanding with Zaha, this is something that I've talked about quite a lot, and it's something which I suppose has gone missing this season, in the fact that that sort of trio down that left hand side of Zaha, Loftus-Cheek and Van Aanholt obviously isn't there now because Loftus-Cheek isn't there, but we seem to be seeing it in the last sort of few games or so where Zaha's got back to his best, Van Aanholt's starting to go back to his best, and of course when Max Meyer plays he also has a partnership with them two players down that left hand side. So we've started to see a great understanding between Zaha and Van Aanholt in particular, and it was nice to see once again in the game here against Leicester obviously a move in the right direction in terms of his performances, but also a good one in terms of that link up play with Zaha. And I'm sure with Zaha getting back to his normal self, and of course maybe Van Aanholt getting a little bit more involved going forward, we could see maybe another goal or a few more assists from Van Aanholt this season, because of course we know that he's got that ability to do so. But overall I do think a 6 is a fair result, when you consider first half was quite subdued, but in the second half, dealing with Demarai Gray, he done a fairly solid job. So I do think his performance here was much better than recent games, a move in the right direction, a step in the right direction, but certainly not necessarily just yet, or not just yet back to his best, but hopefully there'll be more to come in the next few weeks. So I'm now going to move on to the first player in our midfield and our captain, Luka Milivojevic, who I'm going to give a 7 overall. Now, much like many players in the team, I suppose you could argue it was a game of two halves for Luka, where in the first half he wasn't necessarily the greatest, and in terms of him playing well recently, it certainly was sort of a subpar performance from him in that respect. But in terms of the second half, much like the rest of the team, the fact that he got a greater control of the midfield, and in terms of getting the penalty and helping us secure the 3 points, he of course was really important in that. So I do think the 7 is a fair reflection when you consider his first half wasn't terrible, but wasn't the greatest considering how he's been recently, and of course the second half was a lot better. Now in terms of a person in particular that he had to deal with, well, obviously that was James Maddison. Playing down the middle in the centre of the park, he of course we know already is one of Leicester's biggest threats. So the fact that Luka did struggle a little bit to track him quite early on in the game, mainly because Maddison, or the reason it was so obvious is because Maddison kept popping up in all these spaces, coming in between the lines quite early on in the game. And obviously the reason why we were under the cosh for quite a lot of the game is just because we were leaving these spaces in behind. It obviously meant that people like Maddison were just a constant threat and being constant trouble for us. And for large periods of the game in that first half, the reason why we were under the cosh is just because Luka in particular wasn't tracking Maddison in the midfield, allowing Maddison to get in behind. And of course when you've got someone like Maddison who's got the threat he has, he of course is going to cause you problems. So whilst I do think Luka's performance in the second half was a lot better, obviously his first half did leave a lot to be desired, and I suppose I'm not going to criticise him too much because the whole team was quite disappointing in that first half. Yes, we got the lead and we went in 1-0 ahead, but it was quite disappointing in terms of our performance. But Luka was one of these players that if he had just done what he had done in the second half in terms of stopping Leicester in their tracks, making it difficult for Maddison to supply the forward of Leicester, if we had just dealt with that a little bit better, and if Luka had done or given protection to the back four like he's done in previous games, then maybe we would have seen that. But like I've said already, didn't really hamper what was a good performance from him. Now, like I've said already, obviously we gained the lead, and towards the end of that first half, I think he gained a little bit more control of the game. And once again, maybe that's just a confidence thing. You're not playing great, but you get that goal and it boosts your confidence. Whatever it was, like I've said already, he did improve, obviously in that second half, but certainly towards the end of that first half. And of course, in terms of his deliveries from set pieces, they were unusually quite poor from him. So whilst I could talk about you know, the control he had on the midfield after we got our goal. I could talk about the spot kick he obviously scored, so the penalty he scored to make it 3-1. I could talk about that all day, but in terms of some of his corners and, you know, some of his free kicks, they were a little bit disappointing. So I suppose we've seen in recent weeks a sort of a mixture between some good deliveries, some not so good deliveries, and this was a game where we didn't see any good deliveries, and most of his deliveries from set pieces were quite poor. So I do think it was sort of a mixed bag from Luka, you know, that's why I've given him a 7 overall, because if he had tracked Maddison better in that first half, you know, if he hadn't have given Maddison space to get in behind, or if he'd been a little bit more, I suppose, combative, let's say, in terms of putting in a tackle and essentially just making it difficult for Leicester, then maybe it would have been different. But like I said already, this is what I like to see with players, you know, if they have an average half in a game, you want them to come out better in the second half, and that's exactly what Luka did, you know. What he was missing in the first half in terms of being combative and having a control of the midfield, winning that midfield battle, what he lacked in the first half, he completely changed that and brought that into the second half. And I suppose, you know, he topped it off what was a good performance overall with the penalty, which of course we know how good he and how reliable he is from penalties. So of course it was nice to see him score yet another Palace penalty. Now in terms of a few stats, you know, moving away from his performance, because I do think the 7 is a fair reflection there. But, you know, that was his 8th goal of the season. Yes, he scored that wonder strike, and aside from that, he's obviously scored 7 penalties. But if you put that aside, 8 goals for a defensive midfielder is, of course, a great record. You know, obviously we always talked about Milivojevic, how good he was for the team. But, you know, him and Luka are quite similar in the fact that how they play. But the thing that Luka has above Milivojevic is just that ability to score goals. You know, yes, obviously most of them have been penalties, but nevertheless 8 goals for a defensive midfielder in this season is of course very impressive. And actually if you look at his whole Palace career, so over the sort of, I think it's about 60 games he's played across, you know, his 2.5 seasons he's been at the club, you know, he scored 20 goals in the Premier League. And I think the record, well, before Wilf overtook it, of course, Armstrong's record, that was, I think it's 23 goals. So the fact that a defensive midfielder in Luka has got 20 goals in his Palace career and is almost close to coming second place in our all-time Premier League goal scorers just goes to show how good he is, how potent he is from the penalty spot. But also, like I said, going back to comparing him to Jednak was a great servant for the club, a great captain, and yes, he scored a few great goals for us, but that wasn't really part of his game. His main game was defending, whereas Luka has got that ability to do that defensive work, but actually in terms of being that potent and being a very reliable person from the penalty spot, that's exactly what he is. And the fact that he can pop up with good goals as well is great to see. So a game of 2 halves here overall, and I do think the 7 is a fair reflection. You know, should have done better to track Maddison and other attacking players in that first half, but the fact that in the second half he gained a better control of the midfield, you know, started to win that midfield battle, and the fact that he was able to get that spot kick just to sort of put the cherry on the top of the cake for the performance to make it 3-1 was of course good to see. And as you can see by the celebrations, you know, he's obviously, everyone is delighted as well, but in terms of him in particular, you know, it was nice for him to actually get rewarded for what was a good turnaround in terms of his performance. You know, first half not that great, second half excellent, so it was nice to see him get a reward for that second half performance. But overall, Luka Milivojevic here, I do think a 7 is a fair result. So I'm going to move on now to his midfield partner, and that is James McArthur, who I am going to give an 8 overall. Now obviously McArthur's been a player who's divided opinion over the last sort of few weeks or so, and rightly so, because the word I used is, or I've used recently, is consistently average, because that's exactly what he's been. You know, he hasn't been the best in terms of what we know he can do, and he hasn't been the worst, and he hasn't been, even though he's one of the first names on the team sheet, he hasn't necessarily lived up to the hype. So, or not the hype, but his standards, let's say, that he normally set. So of course before the game, once again, a lot of debate as to whether he should have started, and personally for me, I put out there going, this is a good lineup, bar the fact that McArthur is playing as opposed to Maya, because of course Maya was fantastic against Doncaster. Now of course, understandably, you know, people were quite frustrated because of, you know, McArthur hasn't necessarily been that great recently, but I've given him an 8, and it just goes to prove that sometimes you criticise players, but sometimes they step up to the plate and just prove how crucial they are to the team. So whilst it's undeniable that, you know, Max Meyer is a fantastic player, but maybe Roy Hodgson just prefers, in the system he plays, just that tenacity, let's say, of McArthur, and it certainly paid off. You know, McArthur got 2 assists in this game, and I think that's his 3rd assist in his last 2 games. So whilst his performances may not be great for our perspective, the stats are there to back it up why he should be starting in the team, because of that influence he has, the fact that he can pop up with the assists like he did here against Leicester on 2 occasions. Now, one of the reasons, aside from the 2 assists that he got in the game, that I was really impressed with his performance, and I've given him an 8, it's just the sheer amount of defensive work he done in the first half. You know, because obviously I talked already the fact that Luka in particular in that midfield wasn't necessarily the greatest in that first half, and that's just because as a whole, as a collective, as a team, we were quite lacklustre in that first half, and that's just because Leicester were in the ascendancy, they had a little bit more control, and ultimately when that's the case, a few of your players are going to struggle. But the fact that McArthur, who's the player people have criticised, the fact that he was arguably our best player in that first half because of that sheer amount of defensive work he had to do was of course good to see. And much like people like Sacco and Joe Ward, you know, quite a lot of the time McArthur, even though he's been playing in more advanced positions recently, he was coming back, he was putting his body on the line quite bravely as well, and there was one attempt from Maddison in particular where McArthur got in the way. So, you know, yes, people will criticise him, but actually if you look at his game, and when he has a good game, it's really noticeable what he did in terms of his defensive work, the fact that he was getting forward, getting an assist, and also, you know, the fact that even though he was primarily playing as a forward player in our midfield three, he was still able to come back and do that defensive block, which of course is really impressive. Now, I might as well move on to the first of his 2 assists. Obviously, the first one was quite bizarre. You know, obviously I'll go on to talk about Michy Batshuayi in a minute. Now, when I first saw the goal, it was a bit like, oh, that's quite a lucky shot, you know, or quite a lucky shot and a little flick from Batshuayi. You know, McArthur's tried to shoot. Obviously, it's got he shot, it's got deflected, and it looks like it's going to go out. And then Batshuayi gets the smallest of touches. Now, of course, it's quite bizarre because, you know, it was an effort, it took a wicked deflection, and then Michy Batshuayi scored from it. So, of course, you could argue, you know, that's not the greatest assist because you haven't directly done that, but, you know, that goal all came from McArthur. Obviously, you know, I think it was Luka driving the ball forward, passing the ball to McArthur, and then McArthur timing it right, you know, to have a shot. Yes, it was arguably going wide, but nevertheless, got that shot, went into the path of Batshuayi, and of course, he was able to wrong foot Schmeichel and of course handed us a surprise lead. So whilst it was quite a bizarre goal in the fact that it was such a minuscule touch from Batshuayi, nevertheless it's an assist, and it's a bit bizarre that you look back to last season where Zaha's I think it was McArthur's goal against against Watford, I think it was, and Zaha's run to the byline, crossed the ball in, and then McArthur's had a shot, but because that goal or that shot, that cross from Zaha to McArthur, because it took the slightest deflection, Zaha didn't get the assist for that. But yet McArthur in this game here got the assist for that shot, which ricocheted off a player, and then Batshuayi scored from him. So it's a bit of a bizarre situation, but nevertheless, McArthur, I think he's on 5 assists for the season now. So whilst in our eyes he's having a bad season and Maximise should be starting instead of him, the stats are there to back up what, you know, the qualities he brings to the side. But like I said already, you know, a really bizarre assist to get, but nevertheless an assist. And obviously because we got that lead, it sort of lifted the spirits, let's say, of the whole team, and it seemed to improve our performance of everyone across the field. So in terms of our first half performance, yes, it was disappointing, yes, it was lacklustre, but that goal gave us the boost. So of course the fact that McArthur was involved in that was of course good to see. Now obviously the second goal that McArthur assisted was, obviously the first one was quite bizarre, but this one was just sheer quality. Obviously Zaha scored his goal from that. Obviously I could talk about Zaha, I'm going to talk about him in a minute, in the fact that he got a nice touch on that, or I suppose it's a volley because it was quite a high cross, but the ball from McArthur was absolutely outstanding. You know, obviously the fact that McArthur, or obviously I talked about Saka already driving the ball forward, but the fact that McArthur was able to create as much space as he did, you know, there were 3 or 4 players around him, and the fact that he was able to cross it, lovely weight in it, lovely curl in it, right to the far post where Zaha was there, obviously just to put it in at the back post was of course, you know, great to see. And you know, obviously you could argue, or you could look at it, and I've said quite a lot this season, we need to be getting balls into the box, and quite honestly, I wouldn't really care how we put the ball into the box, but when you've got someone like McArthur who can put in the ball, not just necessarily just hoofing the ball and hoping for the best, but when you've got someone like McArthur who put in the ball so accurately, you know, through to Zaha, who of course he went through and scored, was of course, you know, really great to see. And you know, the fact that he got so much criticism before the game, the fact that he made up for that by getting 2 assists and putting in a man of the match performance, you know, obviously I'm going to talk about my man of the match in a minute, but in terms of that, you know, he really impressed me. And like I've said already, you know, obviously I've said already quite a lot this season, I want us to get more balls into the box, and quite honestly I just want us to, you know, when we get to the byline, put the ball in and hope for the best. But if we're not going to do that, I'd rather have people like McArthur putting in pinpoint crosses like this to people like Batshuayi, people like Zaha, people like Townsend at the back post, so they can score. And the delivery there for Zaha's first goal was absolutely outstanding. A very nice clipped ball just over the head of the defenders. You know, McArthur put it over there, and of course Zaha was able to score. So once again, a fantastic performance from McArthur, you know, fully deserving of the 8 I've given him. And like I've said already, you know, I'm going to put my hands up and say, you know, I was guilty of it before the game. I was criticising him, saying, why isn't Maya starting? But then when you consider, you're looking at our tactics in this game, our tactics were to sit back, defend deep, and essentially absorb the Leicester pressure and then hit on them on the counter-attack. And that's exactly what we did, and it seemed to work for us. So whilst Maya is a more creative player, for that system where we're sitting deep and, you know, your midfield players are getting involved, McArthur is a better suit, and it just showed and it prevailed in the game that actually when we were going forward on the attack and when we were looking to create chances, people like McArthur really stood up and made themselves count. So overall, I was really impressed with McArthur's performance. Obviously, first half in particular, you know, with his sheer amount of defensive work was obviously outstanding. The fact that he put his body on the line, especially from that chance from Maddison, was of course, you know, really impressive. But the main thing for me is, and it just goes back to that criticism he was getting before the game, the sheer fact that he got 2 assists in a game where quite a lot of people criticising him was of course great to see. So James McArthur here, playing alongside Luka in midfield, I do think an 8 is a fair result. So I'm now going to move on to the final player in our midfield 3, and that is of course Jeffrey Schlupp, who I'm going to give a 6 overall. Now when you consider Jeffrey Schlupp's been by far one of our best players in the last sort of few weeks or so, this was a performance, not necessarily going back down to earth, but a performance where he wasn't quite to the standard he set over the last sort of few weeks or so. Now that's not to say that he was bad in this game, it's just the fact that, you know, coming back to his old club, he probably he wasn't necessarily putting in a performance he would have hoped for, mainly because he didn't quite necessarily live up to the standards he set in recent weeks. But one of the reasons why, and I've said this quite a lot this season, why players' performances might differ when they go back to their old club, is maybe just a bit of the pressure going back to an old stadium that you've played at and playing against players that used to be your teammates. So maybe that affected him somewhat, and maybe that's why his performance was a little bit subdued than previous games. But I do think he, you know, even though it wasn't the best game from him, I think he's for sure 100% deserved to start the game because he's had a good run of form in the central midfield, and especially in terms of being that pivot or being that sort of supplier, let's say, between the defence and the attack. So the fact that he was able to, in recent weeks, link up them 2 positions of the field so well is of course good to see. So by far, coming back to his old club, he deserved to start the game. But the thing that was quite disappointing about his performance and why he didn't live up to the standards he set recently, it's just a sheer fact that he wasn't getting forward as much as he has done recently. Now, I do understand, you looking at our first half in particular, we were sitting very deep, absorbing the pressure and hitting them on the counter-attack, but in the second half when the game opened up and Leicester were trying to get back into it and we were exposing them on the counter-attack, it would have just been a little bit more nicer for Jeffrey Schlupp, rather than just playing sort of a general sort of central midfield role, actually try and advance forward, try and get involved. And that's something which has seen him succeed in recent weeks. You know, you look at the Doncaster game, that fantastic drive forward from the centre of the midfield, and then he goes on to score. So it was a little bit disappointing not to see that here against Leicester City, but like I've said already, playing against his old club and the fact that he's been in such good form now that maybe it would just drop off for a few games or so, or, you know, like all players, you might have an off game. That obviously, I think, was the case here. But like I said already, in that first half in particular, I think it would have been a lot nicer to see him go forward a little bit more, because we were under pressure, we were under the cosh from Leicester City. It would have been a little bit nicer just to see Jeffrey Schlupp against his former club actually use his pace to get in behind and actually try and penetrate Leicester, because yes, we went ahead 1-0 and finished at half 1-0, but it would have been a little bit nicer for us just to try and actually sort of counter what Leicester were doing in that first half. And, you know, in terms of his second half, much like quite a lot of the players in the team, and hence why I've given him a 6, he saw a lot more of the ball in the second half and his overall performance did improve. And when you consider he obviously technically won't get the assist, because you don't get assists for winning penalties, but you do get assists on fantasy football. So whichever way you look at it, Jeffrey Schlupp got the assist for the penalty he won. Obviously the ball, Michy Batshuayi had a shot, he deflected out. Obviously Jeffrey Schlupp's picked up the ball on the edge of the area, gone into the box, obviously being tripped up by Jonny Evans. So you're looking at that going, yes, Jeffrey Schlupp was quite anonymous for the game because he wasn't necessarily getting involved, especially going forward, as he would have liked. But the fact that when it mattered, when we had a chance, you know, when we were leading the game late on, had a chance to get another goal, he obviously was making a drive into the box, which shows his determination to get into the forward positions, and of course eventually got fouled. So whilst it's not technically an assist, I'm going to give him an assist there. And, you know, that sort of penalty really just showed what he should have been doing throughout the whole game, because if he had shown that much determination in the first half, for example, by actually driving into the box and looking to get the ball or looking to cross the ball in for people like Zaha, like Batshuayi, then maybe we could have had a goal or more goals in that first half. But like I said already, a bit of a subdued performance, but certainly does deserve the 6. But like I said already, what was a sort of lacklustre performance from him? Not up to the standards of recent weeks. It obviously was, I suppose, bettered by the fact that he ended up getting the assist after being fouled by Jonny Evans for the penalty. So I'm now going to move on to the first player in our front three, and that is Andros Townsend, who I'm going to give a 6 overall. Now, much like what has been a sort of a reoccurring theme for quite a lot of players in this game here against Leicester, it's just the fact that it was sort of a game of two halves, where in the first half, it's by far was not Townsend's best half of football, and to be honest, it wasn't really a surprise, because like I've said already, because we were sitting so deep, and because we were just sort of looking to counter Leicester City as opposed to sort of going full out and attacking them, it basically meant that going forward we were quite blunt, I suppose is the word I've seen a few people use across social media and stuff. So I suppose in that respect, because we were sitting deep and because we weren't really looking to go forward, people like Townsend, who like to get forward, like to use their pace, like to get to the byline, put crosses in, people like him couldn't necessarily get going. And especially in that first half, obviously we were under the cosh, and Leicester were by far the better team because they were just constantly attacking us. But it would have been nicer to see us actually try and counter that a little bit more than we did, with people like Townsend actually just having a go at the defenders. Because as we saw as the game went on, I think look at Wilf's our Palace's fourth goal and Wilf's second goal, we literally used pace and literally running behind the Leicester defence. So if we had done that a little bit more in the first half, as opposed to being a little blunt, then maybe someone like Townsend, for example, could have had a better influence on the game. But much like the rest of the team, it was a game of two halves, because he grew into the game, especially after half time. Whatever was said at half time seemed to work, not only in the fact that we scored 3 goals to end the game 4-1, but also just because we just came out rejuvenated, a lot better in the second half. So whatever it was, Townsend obviously grew into the game, and whilst in the first half, going forward, and him in particular were quite blunt, weren't really getting involved, he obviously was looking to exploit the space in behind, was looking to open up the Leicester City back line, and also he was obviously looking to combine well with people like Zaha and Batshuayi. So not only was Townsend made an improvement in terms of just looking to get involved, he was actually looking to create space and also looking to combine well with other players, and that's something which he could have easily done. If our approach to the game had been slightly different in the first half, then maybe we could have had a different result, in the fact that maybe we would have played better in that first half. But nevertheless, much like a lot of players, it was obviously great to see him come out in the second half a lot better. And when you consider, like I said already, very, very blunt going forward, weren't really looking to go forward that much. And then when you combine that to this, or compare that to the second half, where he was looking to get space in behind, looking to combine well with other players, it really just shows the sort of juxtaposition between his first and second half performances. Now, there was one thing in particular which was quite disappointing, and probably, well, for me personally, is the reason why he's limited to a 6. It's just the fact that quite a lot of the time he was sort of bullied off the ball quite a lot by Maddison, and I suppose a consequence of that is just the ball was sort of kept alive in the box. Oh yeah, because obviously he was shrugged off the ball by Maddison quite easily. The ball was kept alive in the box, and obviously Leicester were able to clear. But that's obviously something that's quite disappointing. Maybe Townsend, if he hadn't have been shrugged off too easily by Maddison, then maybe there could have been a different result. But like I've said already, because the ball came, or Townsend gave the ball away so easily to Maddison, kept the ball alive inside the box, and of course eventually down the line that led to it being 1-1, because of course the ball inside the box led to the home side's equaliser. Now obviously I made that seem a bit more confusion than it should have been, but essentially obviously he played well in offensive positions, but when he was when he was in defensive positions like that goal, he gave the ball away too cheaply, and of course we were punished, because obviously that was an equaliser. But luckily for us, we went on to score 2 other goals anyway, which didn't really matter in terms of, or 3 other goals, because it didn't really matter in that respect. But nevertheless, obviously something which Townsend should look to improve on, because he's normally good at doing that. So that's something really to pick out about his performance. But like I've said already, I've given him a 6 because it wasn't the best, wasn't really the worst performance from him. First half quite anonymous because of just essentially our approach to the game. Second half grew into it quite a lot, was looking to get space in behind, looking to open up the game, looking to combine with the strike partners. But I suppose the other negative of his performance is just the fact that chance in particular, where he was shrugged off the ball too easily by Maddison, and of course, rather than us just clearing the ball, Maddison's obviously kept it alive in the box, and eventually that led to the equaliser. So there's sort of positives and negatives about Townsend's performance, so I do think overall the 6 is a fair reflection of his game, and certainly, like I've said already, not the worst, not the best performance, but we want to see him get back to his best, his December and January form, because that obviously was absolutely outstanding. So I'm now going to move on to the striker in our front three, and that is Michy Batshuayi, who I'm going to give an 8 overall. Now, of course, Batshuayi, I talked about him quite a lot against Doncaster, in the fact that the 2 games previous to Doncaster, he played really well, but coming into the Doncaster game, his first start for Palace, a great opportunity for him to get off the mark, and actually he was fairly disappointing in that game. And of course, coming into this game here against Leicester City, he got the nod ahead of Christian Benteke, and actually he took his chance here and made up for that slightly disappointing performance at Doncaster with a fantastic performance here, hence why I've given him an 8. Now, in terms of the first half, once again, going back to that point, most of the team were quite lacklustre in that first half. And actually, in that first half, and I've seen a few people pick this out, he had sort of a trouble controlling his elbows in the first half. And that was just because he wasn't really looking to get involved, wasn't really trying to use his physical presence that effectively. And that's why in that first half, it was quite disappointing. So, in terms of controlling his elbows in particular, which is something that people picked out, that was, of course, which was something quite disappointing. And actually, in terms of overall the first sort of 45 minutes, that was really the only real thing of note from him, the fact that the sort of lack of control of his elbows, because aside from that, it was quite a largely anonymous game from him. But the fact that his first 45 minutes was quite lacklustre, but then literally just before half time he pops up with the goal, really just goes to show the quality he's got. Now, I talked already the fact that it was quite a lucky goal. Well, I say lucky goal because actually the touch that Batshuayi got was a striker's instinct. You got that little touch just to flick the ball and wrong foot the keeper. Yes, that's true, and yes, that's great. But then on the other hand, you could say it's quite a lucky goal. Took a deflection and quite lucky in that respect. But whatever you've got to say, yes, he was quite lacklustre in that first half. But then, even though that is the case, it shows how good he is as a player, or how good a player he is. The fact that when he's having a lacklustre half, he can still pop up with a goal. And yes, like I've said already, we've hit them on the break, and yes, McArthur's shot was deflected and it wrong foot cashed for Schmeichel, but nevertheless, it was against the run of play, gave us the lead and allowed us to go in at half-time 1-0 up. So, whilst, like I've said already, he had issues controlling his elbows in that first half and was fairly anonymous throughout the whole of the first half, the fact that he popped up when it really mattered just before half-time to get that slight flick on it just to divert the ball into the net to score his first goal for Palace was of course good to see. And going back to that Doncaster game, he missed a fantastic opportunity to score a goal there, so it was nice for him to actually finally get off the mark and score what you could argue is a quite lucky goal, but a goal which had striker's instinct all about it, and that's something we've obviously been missing up top. Now, in terms of us actually regaining the lead after obviously Leicester got back into it, so of course involved in that goal to make it 2-1. He obviously done his bit in the build up to that goal in terms of helping carry the ball forward, carrying it up the field before obviously laying it off to Saka, who of course drove even further forward. So the fact that his first half was quite bad, but then in the second half, because of that confidence of scoring that goal just before half time, allowed him to have that confidence to be involved in that build up play, allowing us to get the ball up the field. So the fact that it had a positive impact on this game was of course good to see. And of course laid it off to Saka, and then we know what happened next, Saka to McArthur and McArthur to Zaha. So obviously I've given him an 8 because of the goal he scored, because obviously it was such a great finish in terms of, you could say it was lucky, but a great finish in terms of having that instinct to get the flick to wrong foot the keeper. And then the fact that he was involved in the good build-up play to our goal to get us back into the league was also good as well. So I do think an 8 overall is a fair result, because when you consider that disappointing performance he had against Doncaster, the fact that he picked himself up from that, scored the goal, was involved in our other goals, and if you really sort of put aside that sort of 40 minutes, 45 minutes or so where he was quite anonymous, it was a really good performance from him, and I do think overall does deserve the 8. And of course, do comment below with your thoughts about Michy Batshuayi, how many goals you think he'll score between now and the end of the season, and whether you do think, even though Chelsea have got an impending transfer ban, whether you do think we might have a chance of getting him in the summer. So I'm now going to move on to the final player in our starting 11, and that is of course the left winger Wilfried Zaha, who I'm going to give an 8 overall. Now, in terms of Zaha's performance, it was much the same in terms of Batshuayi's, in the fact that he got the goals at important times in the game, killed the game off, and he was involved in all of our good play throughout the whole game. Now, obviously going back to the first half, much like I suppose much like the whole team, but in terms of our attacking play, much like Batshuayi, Zaha spent most of that first half, being tracked back by people like Ricardo Pereira, and essentially you've got to give him credit because he's done a decent job in terms of dealing with him. But of course, Zaha didn't quite have the freedom he would have liked. So much like Batshuayi, I've given both of them 8 because of what they've done in the second half. But in terms of the first half, he spent most of that half, tracking the forward runs of Pereira, as well as Pereira dealing with him. So sort of a good battle in that respect, but sort of restricted him. But I suppose the real positive of that first half performance is, yes, he obviously was getting dealt with and he had to deal with Pereira relatively well, but the fact that he was actually coming back, playing on that left hand side, coming back and helping Fernando down that left hand side, just giving that extra protection and support to the left back was of course great to see. So whilst Batshuayi in that first half was completely anonymous, other than the goal he scored, Zaha was fairly anonymous because he wasn't really looking to get forward because he obviously had to deal with Pereira, but when it did matter, like in terms of helping out Fernando, he was able to do that. So it's sort of a juxtaposition in that first half in the fact that Zaha had some good parts, and of course he also had his fair amount of bad parts in that half. But of course, he's just come off his 2-match ban, or it's sort of a 1-match ban with another match ban, with the West Ham game in between. But let's say 2-match ban, he's come back from that, returning to the starting 11, and essentially he made his presence known. He got us back in front with a fantastic goal. Of course, the build-up play in terms of Batshuayi, Sacco, McArthur, obviously that was all great, but the fact that Zaha timed his run perfectly from the right hand side, hit it on the volley, and obviously scored, that was obviously great to see. Get us in front, make it 2-1, and certainly 10 minutes after Leicester equalised, it was really important to get that goal, so that was of course great to see. And of course, even though we were 3-1 up at that point, he rounded it off to make it 4-1 in injury time. A great goal on the counter-attack, and in terms of looking at the stats, I think that was his 50th goal for Palace, and do correct me if I'm wrong because I've seen some people say 50, some people say it's his 51st, but nevertheless 50 goals for Palace in his career is a fantastic achievement for him. So whilst we could be talking all day about his performance here, I've given him an 8 because he scored 2 goals, he was influential both defensively and offensively, offensively getting the goals, being a threat, defensively helping out Fernando. So I could talk all day about that, but what you've got to talk about, he obviously broke the record earlier on in the season, Armstrong's record in terms of most Premier League goals for Palace. So the fact that he's now surpassed that and he's got to a sort of a career point for him, or career standard, let's say, and the fact that he's got his 50 goals for Palace is great to see. And he's 26 years old. Hopefully he stays at Palace. Touch wood, because I think that you can really do a job for us. Hopefully he doesn't leave in the summer. Touch wood once again. But it's really nice to see him not necessarily break that record, because it's not a record, but sort of break that duck, or break that ceiling, let's say, of getting 50 goals. So that's a great achievement for him. And another stat is that this was his 4th goal in his last 3 games. So of course he's been suspended for, I think it was for obviously a few games. He had a 2-match suspension. But the fact that alongside that, so you're looking at the Southampton game, you're looking at the West Ham game, and you're looking here, the fact that he's got 4 goals in his last 3 games shows that he's back to his best. And it isn't a coincidence for me that as soon as he got moved back to his natural position on either wing, so this game, the goals he scored came down the right hand side, but then he started the game playing on the left. Whichever way you look at it, he's now moved back out wide as opposed to playing up front. We've now got a proper target man, or a quality striker in Batshuayi up top, and I don't think it's a coincidence that we've now started to see the best of Wilfried Zaha. So a great performance from him. Even though his first half was slightly disappointing, the fact that he still helped out Fernando defensively was of course great to see. But in terms of making a real impact, coming back into that starting 11 following your ban by actually scoring a first goal, which was a great volley from that lovely lofted McArthur ball, but then you also top that off with a goal on the counter attack, lovely ball from Jordan Ayew, and you obviously run through and go and score. A great finish as well, because he was sort of a metre or two away from that near post. So the fact that he was able to still get it past Kasper Schmeichel was of course great to see. So the fact that he played so well, got the 2 goals that he deserved, as well as continuing his great form, which has seen him score 4 goals in his last 3 games, that's of course great to see. So once again, Wilfried Zaha here, another great attacking performance from him, and hopefully he can carry on his form in the next few weeks. And of course United's coming up on Wednesday evening, so maybe that's a chance for him to finally score a goal against United, and obviously essentially score against his old club. So it'll be nice to see what he can do on Wednesday evening. So I'm now going to move on to the 3 subs we made in the game. Of course, Scott Dann came on for Saka, which I've talked about already. Chiku Kouyaté came on for Townsend, and of course Jordan Ayew came on with about 5 minutes to go. Now, in terms of Scott Dann and Cheku Kouyaté, I'm going to give them both 6s. Obviously, in terms of Scott Dann, he came on for the injured Sacco literally shortly after we went 2-1 up, and essentially his job was just to come on for the injured player. It wasn't really it was an enforced substitution, not something we would have hoped for, but nevertheless Scott Dann came in, and I've given him a 6 because even though he hasn't played any Premier League games this season, the fact that he came in, slotted in, adapted to the game so quickly, and actually kept a watchful eye on Jamie Vardy and dealt with him so well was of course good to see. And it's always difficult, you know. I think he came on when we were about to take a corner, or when Leicester were about to take a corner, so you've got a real quality about him, the fact that he could come off the bench and adapt so quickly and, you know, play so well, especially against Jamie Vardy. Now, in terms of Cheku Kouyaté, he obviously came off for Townsend, so we brought off an attacking player in Townsend, moved Jeffrey Schlupp out wide, moved Kouyaté into the midfield next to McArthur and Luka, and essentially he was just there just to help us see out the game, just to give us a little bit more strength in the middle of the park. And essentially the thing I liked about his game, and the reason I've given him a 6, is that he kept it very simple, won tackles, provided good protection to the back four, and essentially helped us to see the game out. And that's something, they're really key points that I've seen lots of people pick out, is that yes, he only came on for a few minutes, but people picked out saying his play was very simple. He came on to do a job, which was to see out the game, and obviously he was winning tackles, giving protection to the back four, and doing exactly what you would expect from your players. Now, in terms of Jordan Ayew, I wouldn't normally give a rating to someone who come on with about 5 minutes left to go, but the fact that he came on had such an impact in terms of his offensive play, you know, looking to get involved, looking to help us, you know, get that 4th goal, and the fact that he obviously got the assist for Zaha was a really great thing to see. So I'm going to give him a 7 overall. I wouldn't normally give a rating for someone who was on the pitch for such a short amount of time, but the fact that he came on and made such an impact, not just in terms of his offensive work, but also the fact that he got the assist, that was of course great to see. So I do think all of our subs, you know, do deserve credit. Obviously Scott Dann, Kouyaté coming on, obviously one of them enforced, one of them not, but of course both of them helped us to see out the game. And of course Jonny Evans came on just to give us a few fresh legs in the game, and certainly made his impact known by obviously the fact that he obviously went on to get the assist for Palace's 4th goal, and of course Zaha's 2nd. Now, in terms of just a small summary of the game overall, and obviously these are a few things that I've sort of talked about, you know, throughout the podcast, but I might as well just sort of summarise it all here. Now, in terms of the game itself, you could say that the scoreline was quite flattering in the fact that we probably didn't deserve to win 4-1. It's just the fact that Leicester were just quite bad in that second half, but nevertheless, it was the reason we won that game, and the reason why you could argue we do deserve to win the game by that margin. It's just the fact that our second half, and the fact that we were passing the ball much better, the fact that we were actually taking our chances we created, was of course one of the reasons for that. So whilst you could argue it was a bit flattering, you know, and it was mainly because of Leicester's downfall in the second half, but because of how good our second half performance was, the fact that we were passing the ball a lot better, and I think in the whole game we had 5 shots on target and we scored 4 goals, which really just goes to show how clinical we were in this game. So whilst it was mainly because of how bad Leicester was, but you know, the other side of that is actually we do deserve to win the game by that margin, and it isn't really that flattering. And you know, when you consider we got the manager sacked, you know, it really just goes to show how good your performance was, because it wasn't just the fact that Leicester were quite unlucky, it's just the fact that they were far from their best in that second half. Now, in terms of the first half, going back to that, we obviously lost the midfield battle in that first half, but once again, going back to the point about that second half, the fact that we grew much better in the second half is the reason we won the game. The fact that we changed something at half time, a little tactical change, as Luka said, the fact that we made that little change seemed to help us for the better and helped us to go on and see out the game. So whilst, you know, I don't think anyone would be wrong in saying we were very, very poor in that first half, but the fact that we, even though we lost that midfield battle, we came out with a positive mindset in that second half was of course good to see. Now, of course, there are a number of reasons why we've won, like I've said already. You could argue a bit of luck. You know, you're looking at our first goal, you could argue it's a lucky sort of little deflection for Michy Batshuayi, but I'm saying it's a striker's instinct. You could look at some very, very poor Leicester defending. You know, I think it's the last 4 games we played against Leicester, we've won on an aggregate of 13-1. So just showing that we're very good at exploiting Leicester's defending. You could argue also a number of well-taken chances as well, and the fact that we had sort of opportunist finishes as well. So the fact that we had people like Zaha, well, I suppose Zaha on both occasions, you know, finishing great chances. You know, the balls into the box were great, and obviously his second goal was of course a great counter-attack. So whilst we could argue, or we could talk all day about the poor Leicester defending, actually it was just a number of well-taken opportunistic finishes as well, especially from Zaha, which of course helped us to see out the game. And for me, the main reason why we won the game, yes, our first half wasn't great, but it's just the fact that our defence was so superb. That's the only thing really, or the only real positive from that first half, is the fact that we were so solid defensively. So if you're looking at the game as a whole, obviously we could talk about the Leicester defending or the fact that we were very clinical, but I think our defence is the main reason why we went on to go on and win the game. Now, in terms of the importance of the defence, thankfully for us, they were obviously on their A game. Because, if they hadn't have been, we probably could have lost the game, especially the amount of chances Leicester had in that first half. But like I said already, we probably could have been down and out, 2-0 up. Maybe Leicester could have been at half-time. But once again, the defence is showing its importance by obviously helping us to keep our lead in the half and eventually go on and help us see the game. Now, in terms of a few players here, it was obviously great for Wilf to get back to his best, and that brace is really going to help his confidence because he's been having a slightly disappointing season, but now he's up to 7 goals this season, so nice to see him get back to his best, and off the back of 2 good finishes as well, it must be said. And of course, it was nice for Batshuayi to get his first goal because, of course, coming to our new club and the fact that he's missed a few chances in his last 3 games previous to this, obviously that could have done his confidence no good, but the fact that he finally got that goal to obviously help his confidence, and nice for him to finally just to open his account for Palace, was of course good to see. And I suppose one of the other things which is happening every week now, because of course we've seen the best of him, but it's nice to see Jeffrey Slupp as well. Obviously he's taking every game in his stride now, growing in confidence, and the fact that his directness got us a goal out of nowhere in terms of the penalty was of course great to see as well. So 3 players in particular I want to pick out there in terms of their confidence was really quite good in this game. Now, I don't want to obviously jinx stuff now, but in terms of, you're looking at a league table now, and hopefully, we're on 30 points now. 8 points should hopefully see us safe now, touch wood, but that would obviously take us to 38 points, which for the last few seasons or so has seen teams safe. But obviously you want to hit that 40 mark, and you obviously want to see if you can go as high as possible. But if you're looking at the games coming up, obviously we're on 30 points. To get to 40 points, 3 wins and a draw, and that's pretty doable with the games we have in March, and certainly the games we've got towards the end of the season. So we've got a great chance here to obviously get safe, because 38 points is usually seen teams safe, so that should be the main target, them 40 points. But then also with the games coming up, we should really see, really should be pushing if we get to 40 points to see how high we can go as possible. Because like I've said, it's only 3 wins and a draw to obviously get to that mark, to get to 40 points. So if we can do that in our next sort of few games or so, 4 or 5 games or so, then the games after that we can hopefully push to see if we can get as high as possible. Now, the final point really for me, and this is once again about the league table, we're now as close to the teams above us in terms of your top 8 teams as we are to the bottom team. And yes, we are now 6 points above relegation, and that little bit of a gap has now opened up, but we still could be caught, but hopefully, once again, touch wood, we won't be. But hopefully the fact that we're now closer to the teams above us, Leicester are only 2 points ahead of us, West Ham I think are only 4-5 points ahead of us. So the fact that we're now at the stage where we're bridging that gap between the teams above us and the teams below us. So hopefully we can actually now finish the season strongly, get to 40 points, then, grow from that. And, I think I'm not stupid in saying this, or I'm not biased, but could top 10 be a possibility? I do think so, because if we play like we did against Leicester in the games coming up, especially the games in March, then we certainly could have a good chance at that. So I'm now going to move on to my Man of the Match award. But before I do that and give you my Man of the Match, and I thought the biggest influence on the game, I'm now going to give you the 4 nominations I put forward for the award. Now, when you consider it was sort of a game of 2 halves, where our first half performance was quite disappointing, but of course in the second half all the players upped their game and certainly helped us to see out the game. And even though you may say it was an undeserved 4-1 victory because of just how bad Leicester was, but on the day, the fact that we took our chances, we had 5 shots on goal, scored 4 goals, really just goes to show that clinical edge seems to have come back to us. And I do think overall, looking back at the game, we did obviously deserve the win. Now, in terms of the Man of the Match award, I've seen quite a lot of debate on Twitter, who should win it. And personally for me, I've picked these 4 players because I do think they're a fair reflection, not only in terms of their performances, but in terms of the performance of the team across the field. I've got defenders, midfielders, and of course wingers and strikers. So I've got a nice mix there, but obviously, like I've said already, there may be some disagreements. If you do disagree with anything I've said, of course, comment that below. But I do think overall the players I've picked had obviously a decent game, and obviously were better than the other players on the field. But that's not to say that the rest of the team don't deserve to be in the shortlist, because if I do what other people do in terms of having every single player on the shortlist, then I would do it and see who would win out of that. But the players I've gone with James Tompkins, James McArthur, Wilfried Zaha and Michy Batshuayi. So I've got a nice mix there between players across the field. But like I've said, honestly, I could have picked a lot more other players, from the game, mainly because of just how good our second half performance was. But these players, I do think, on reflection, do deserve to be put forward for the award. Now, in terms of James Tompkins, quite simply, he was defensively solid throughout the game. One block in particular from Barnes from close range, which was, of course, really great to see. And, of course, it was just a decent overall display. So, just because of his defensive solidity throughout the whole game, and the fact that he only made one mistake, and that was a mistake which led to the goal, that is obviously quite a good record in the fact that you played so well, throughout the rest of the game. So for me, James Tompkins, for his defensive solidity, that's why he's on my shortlist. Now, in terms of James McArthur, much the same in terms of his defensive work in that first half in particular was, of course, great to see. And much like Tompkins making the block, there was a block that McArthur made from Maddison, which, of course, was a very brave block. So in terms of, our first two players, both on the shortlist because of their defensive work, and in particular for making fantastic blocks. But for me, aside from the defensive work, the pure fact that McArthur was criticised before the game because people didn't want him to start, and then he just pops up with 2 assists. Obviously the first one for Michy Batshuayi's goal, which you could argue, like I've said, it was lucky or not, and then obviously the one for Zaha's goal, which was a lovely lofted ball. So the fact that McArthur not only done well in that first half where most other players were quite lacklustre in a half, the fact that he played well in both halves of the pitch, and when it mattered, he was able to provide with fantastic assists, was of course good to see. So for defensive work, making blocks, and just the overall fact that he got 2 assists is why he's on my shortlist. Now, in terms of Wilfried Zaha, if you have any player who scores 2 goals in the game, they're of course going to be on the shortlist, and certainly that's the reason for that. But I think the fact that he's now on a good run of form, and the fact that he was able to carry that on by scoring his 4th goal in his last 3 games was of course good to see. And the fact that both of his goals were very well taken as well. He could have scored 2 scrappy goals and maybe not deserved man of the match, but the fact that his goals were such high quality, not only the build-up, but the goals and finishes themselves was of course good to see. You're looking at the first goal, that was a great ball by Maka, and obviously nice finish there, one time under the goalkeeper. And then you look at the other one, Jordan Ayew supplied him, literally run past the Leicester defence, got him behind and scored from a very tight angle. So both goals he scored were very high quality. So you combine that with the fact that his offensive work and his link-up play, and also the defensive work by helping out Villano on occasions, was of course good to see. Now, in terms of my final player, Michy Batshuayi, obviously much like Zaha, in the first half he wasn't necessarily the greatest, but in that second half especially he came to life. But the main thing for me is that literally just before half time we get that lucky goal. Like I said it's lucky, you say that in inverted comments because I personally think it's a striker's instinct from Batshuayi. So the fact that Batshuayi, or the reason I put him on the shortlist, is just because he's provided us with something we've missed in recent weeks. The fact that he was able to be in that right position at the right time to just get that little flick on it, just to get the ball, and wrong foot Kasper Schmeichel to get it and score it, was of course good to see. And of course, even though it was against a run of play, that's what you want your strikers to do. You want them to finish chances, and that's exactly what Batshuayi did. Now, in terms of moving away from the goal he scored, he was also involved in our second goal we scored to make it 2-1. So the fact that he was involved in the build-up as well, so rather than him being the guy on the end of the chances, the fact that he turned provider on that occasion to give the ball to Sakho, who then passed it to McArthur, who then gave that fantastic assist to Zaha. So the fact that Michy Batshuayi, combined the fact that he scored the goal in that first half, which essentially changed the game in our favour by giving us the momentum, but also the fact that he was involved in our other goals, it was of course good to see. Now, in terms of the players here, like I've said already, there are other players in the squad who probably do deserve to be in the shortlist, but I do think Tompkins, McArthur and Zaha and Batshuayi do deserve credit just because of their influence in the game. Now, it's pretty difficult to pick a man of the match for me, and obviously we've got someone who scored 2 goals here who of course you would argue they do deserve to get the man of the match award, and considering they were both very good finishes, I could argue that. But for me, I'm going to go against what most people have said and done on Twitter, but I'm going to give it to James McArthur. So congratulations, James. You don't get a trophy or certificate, but you do get my sincere congratulations on what was yet another solid performance from you. And the only reason I'm going to give it to McArthur instead of Zaha is just because McArthur, the fantastic assist that he provided, obviously the first one was quite lucky with the deflection, but nevertheless he got an assist for that one. And the fact that he got an assist for the second one as well with a lovely lofted ball to Zaha was great to see as well. And I do think think his overall defensive work and work in the midfield as well is something which really impressed me. So, of course, you know, Tompkins, Zaha, Batshuayi all could have got the Man of the Match award. But for me, even though Zaha in particular scored 2 goals, I just think McArthur's influence with the assists he had and that control in the midfield is really the thing that made the difference for me. But do comment below with your thoughts, who you thought should have won the Man of the Match award, and whether you do disagree with the 4 players I put on my shortlist. So now you've heard my match report, player rankings and my Man of the Match. That concludes this week's podcast. Now I've got interviews with Roy Hodgson, Wilfried Zaha, James Tompkins and James McArthur following the game.
Well, congratulations, massive 3 points today.
Massive, man. The main thing is just carrying on the run, really. We ain't lost. And obviously with performances like that, we're only going to win games, so I'm happy with how we're doing.
Clinical in front of goal today, weren't we?
Yeah, literally, it makes such a difference when we just take our time with the final pass, and then obviously hitting the target's the main thing. So yeah, we managed to get the 3 points.
And obviously Jordan comes off the bench. We've got such good depth up front now, haven't we?
Yeah, we do. Before, me and Andros had to scramble up top, trying the most we can, but obviously now there's so much players, so much options for the gaffer. So yes, it's a lot easier for us now. And
your last goal, your final goal, you look like you were buzzing off that.
Yeah, I was. I'm buzzing every time I score, really. So yeah, I'm just happy I can get on a score sheet and obviously put us ahead, because that's the main thing, the points and the performances.
Quick turnaround in United on Wednesday. You looking forward to that one?
Yeah, well, I look forward to every game, man. But yeah, obviously, hopefully we can just reproduce today's performance and see how it goes.
James, great 3 points today.
Yeah, no, massive, massive really, because you see the results sometimes come in when it's a 5:30 kick-off, or games on a Friday night went our way a little bit, but it's just important not really to pay interest to that, and do our bit on the field. And it's a hard game. It's always a hard game playing Leicester away. And we put on another great performance like we normally do against them, actually. So it's just nice to finish our chances, I suppose, which we haven't done much this year, and put away the teams that we've been playing. We haven't been doing it. Tonight is the night, so brilliant.
Yeah. And Mambu picked up an injury in the second half. Did you notice anything or hear anything about that?
No, I obviously saw him when he went down, and obviously worried because one was a good player for us, and it's important. But we'll Denzi come in and obviously use his experience, and it's nice to play with him. So hopefully he's okay. But it's such a big win today.
Yeah. And a man of the match performance from yourself. You must be pleased to get that award.
Yeah, I was just saying, they gave it to me probably before Will scored his second goal, but I'll take it. It's always going to be hard playing against the likes of Vardy and stuff up front, very sharp, and the wingers were sharp as well, so it's important that we stayed on our game. And when you come here and you keep them quiet in the first 15-20 minutes and get the crowd on their backs, that's massive, and we've done that today. I thought it was a great team performance.
So sitting back and soaking up a bit of the pressure and then breaking, was that part of the game plan?
Yeah, no, I think our formation first half didn't work as to our favour. It had a lot of the ball and we're finding easy passes, and we had to stop that second half, and we changed a few things and put Wilfried and Andros, marking their fullbacks, and I think that changed the game in a way, because we were able to use their pace in the counter attack, and sometimes we play our best football in the counter attack. So it was nice to win, and it was a comfortable one in the end.
Yeah. And a quick turnaround, United on Wednesday. He's going to have to recover fast, aren't you?
Yeah. They're a different team now at the minute, so it's going to be a tough game. They've got a game tomorrow, so we've got another day of recovery. If that makes a difference, probably doesn't. But anyway, we need to be on our game, and it's a massive step forward in terms of our points, and getting to that target at the start of the season when we were saying about getting mid-table. Goal difference is very good, so things are looking good, and hopefully we can put a good performance in on Wednesday.
Aka, 3 points. You must be delighted with that.
Yeah, I don't think we were amazing in the first half. Performance level wasn't good enough. We had a word with each other at half time and came out and played a lot better in the second half.
5 shots on target, 4 goals. It's clinical.
Yeah, it is, and it's something that's probably we've let ourselves down this season with, not being as clinical, but today we will, and hopefully it can continue like that.
Sacco picked up an injury in the second half, but we've got good cover in that position, haven't we?
Yeah, we have. Scott came in and done excellent. Solidified the team and made sure that we were strong towards the end of the match.
And we got a quick turnaround, Man United on Wednesday. Gonna have to recover fast.
Yeah, we are, because it was a really tough shift out there. First half especially, they caused a bit of problems, but that's what Premier League matches are about, working hard and making sure you do everything for those 3 points, and we'll do that again against Manchester United.
And for yourself, 2 assists today, you must be pleased with that.
Yeah, am I getting the first one?
I think so.
Yeah, the first one was obviously a slice of luck, a big slice of luck. But the second one, Wilfried Zaha was at that back post, so thankfully he got the goal.
Well, Roy, 4 goals, 3 points away from home. Great result.
Absolutely, yeah. We had to work hard for it. Thought we had to dig in for long periods of the game. I thought our defending was very dogged, very solid. We restricted Leicester to shooting from outside the penalty area for the best part. There wasn't that many real opportunities where they could get a clear sight of our goal, and that's because I thought our back four did very well, and the people in front of them worked very hard. And in the second half, the slight change we made in bringing Wilf and Andros a little bit deeper, I think that gave us even more solidity in terms of our defending play, but it didn't take anything away from the attacking play, because we seemed to get hold of the ball more in midfield and look very dangerous on the counter-attack when spaces opened up.
Do you think you could have asked for much more from your team today?
No, but then it's very rare that I stand in front of a camera after a game and feel that I should be saying I thought I should have got more from our team. I think our team is enormous in that respect. You know, they give always what they can give, and if we don't play that well, it's not because anybody is not trying hard or not focusing or not giving their best. It might just be because football is like that. You know, you don't go onto the field wanting to do anything but play a great game of football. But it's nice today to get this win and to send our fans home happy. Once again, they were excellent. It's a remarkable support we get away from home, and it's nice on these occasions. We did the same up in Doncaster. It's nice to send them home feeling very happy with what they've seen, and also being able to celebrate the 3 points like we intend to celebrate them.
You had 5 shots on target, 4 goals. Do you feel like we're becoming a lot more clinical now?
Yep, I mean, but I always think those statistics are half the story, because sometimes the movements that you have or the attacking situations that develop, they don't get classified as anything, but they are probably just as dangerous as the so-called shot at goal or the so-called shot at target, which really doesn't bother anybody. So I thought we were constantly probing. It's more so in the second half perhaps than in the first half, but we were constantly probing, and I'm pretty sure the Leicester defence would tell you they had a game on their hands today, even though people could point to the fact that we were very clinical with scoring 4 goals from 5 shots on target.
And it was a clear penalty. When Luka steps up, you must be so confident, though.
Yes, I mean, well, you're always worried. You know, penalties do get missed. There's no question that even the very best players miss penalties. But Luka has been unbelievably disciplined and good at making certain that he capitalises on the offence and gets us the goal we need. And it was an important one, because at 2-1, you know, there's still a long way to go. There's quite a lot of time left in the game. They brought a lot of attacking players onto the field, and you're always thinking, well, if we're unlucky here, we'll concede a second, and then perhaps you go on even to lose the game. But at 3-1, I started to relax a little bit more, and as is often the case, when a team is really looking down the barrel of a gun, you know, needing 2 goals to even get themselves back into the game, that's when the opportunity to score the 4th goal comes along. And it was an excellent piece of work. You know, full credit to Jordan Ayew for doing what Michy had done up to then, working so hard to get back and make certain that their deep-lying midfield player didn't get too much time on the ball. On this occasion, he actually robbed Maguire, who was pushed into a midfield position, and Jordan robbed him, broke away using his pace and skill, and then he had the composure to really play a nice pass into Wilf, and that was a good finish for Wilf, a really clinical finish. It's nice to see him score those 2 goals he scored today, where there was a lot of control, but there was also the necessary power.
You brought on those substitutes. You must look at your squad and think, we've got so many options now.
Well, we don't have quite so many at the back as we would like, because we're at the moment we're playing without Martin Kelly and Aaron Wan-Bissaka, and of course we had to take Mamadou Sakho off today, which was not something that we look forward to. But certainly, if you're talking about our options now up front and in midfield, which up to now during my time at the club, or up until the last month or two, have actually been pretty limited quite often. The choices have been at the back rather than in midfield or up front. We are starting to improve in that area, but now we've got to hope that Mamadou Sakho's injury is not too serious and that we can get Wan-Bissaka and Kelly back as soon as possible.
Do you hope to have them back for the United game?
I don't know. I can't make those comments. Obviously they weren't fit for today's game. It's a short turnaround. Our medical staff do an excellent job in that respect, getting players fit and putting them back in at the right times. Often I'm a little bit frustrated because I'd like to see them back earlier, but it's a good job that they don't listen to me, because they bring the players back when they need to be brought back and when they are absolutely fit enough to be brought back. And so we'll have to see on Monday what the situation with those two is, and we'll have to assess Mamadou's injury.
So there you have it. Now you've heard what Roy Hodgson, Wilfried Zaha, James Tompkins and James McArthur had to say after the game. That concludes this week's podcast for the game against Leicester City. But make sure to come back next week for a post-match review of the game against Manchester United. So thanks for listening, and remember to up the Palace.